Hey YouTube, Kiraqualia here, bringing you all an update to my Cardfight Vanguard deck collection for 2021. It's actually a late deck collection. I normally do yearly updates for my Cardfight Vanguard deck collection, and I normally like to do them in the middle of the year and kind of got sidetracked and lost track of time, but still wanted to get a deck collection video out before the year ended. With it, we have the first of my overdress format decks included with this video, so definitely excited to show all the different decks I have for all three of the current formats, including the V Standard, the original Premium, and currently D format or overdress format, however you call it. Very happy with what I have left. I don't have as many of the older decks still remaining in the collection, but without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I think we'll start with the oldest decks, and you'll see a pretty big theme throughout the entire collection, but my first and oldest deck in the collection is my Dragonic Overlord Stride deck. This deck is mixed around with some of the cards from the newer format, including the new triggers that have the updated shield, so try to at least include those with the deck, since with this format you can run any card from any of the Cardfight Vanguard formats, including the strides, which are a big part of the deck altogether. Tried to stick to just the cards that worked very, very well with Dragonic Overlord, and I've mixed around the deck at the moment. I am missing the Legion Mate, which is Dragonic Overlord the End. For this deck, I use them in an older format deck, so I currently have Dragonic Overlord the Legend as the spot filler for that card, but mixed in are just cards that I use, the Stride Fodder with the Progenitor Dragons, the Zygenbergs, you name them. All the different cards for the older format are in this deck. I don't play it as much, but it's one deck I can't part with. I used it definitely the most from the G format when we got the original Dragonic Overlord support from set 13. I was definitely excited because this card just gave you quintet drive, 5 drive checks in total potentially, which was insane for the time, and just the overall power you had with Dragonic Overlord in stride form. And then the other deck I still have from that time are Prisms. This was my favorite Bermuda Triangle deck. It's also the one where I have a few SPs mixed in with the deck, so definitely happy about that. The SPs in Bermuda Triangle were always big, and this is one of the few decks in Cardfight Vanguard that I have double sleeved, just because I was a big fan of Prisms, wanted to go all out with the deck, and it's one I played recently. I haven't really updated it with any of the newer triggers from standard format, but still wanted to at least show what I have for the deck all together and still play around with it. We got a good number of different strides. I think I'm missing a couple of the G Guardians, which are here somewhere. They might even be one of my binary. I think I only have one G Guardian in this deck, but I never really got used to playing double sleeve, but I do enjoy them just to see the different art styles on the cards as well, so kept it together for that one. Those are actually the only two cards from decks from stride format that I have left. Moving on to the standard, if we want to call it that. For that series, this is the one with the imaginary gifts. I have another Dragonic Overlord deck. This one was recently updated with the Dragonic Overlord the Turnabout, and it's also still organized with the X, the End, and all those cards. I guess I could technically run the End from this deck also in the premium version, since you can use any cards for that format, but still kept them in the V Standard deck. So anything that was from that format, these are some extra cards in the back that I mix back and forth with the 50 card deck, and I have the Quick Shield for Kagero as well, since this is one of my favorite decks overall, even some of these signed gift markers for this deck. But yeah, this was one of the first ones I built for V Standard, so I kept on updating it. I also have the Dragonic Overlord the Greats from this time around, just in my deck building binder also. And I also have the Legion support still for Dragonic Overlord if we want to go all the way back to Legion format. Definitely do want to start filming some games from that with the latest update in Zero, so definitely will get around to doing that. One of the more recent decks that I had from V Standard, and one I'm definitely excited for since we are getting Cecilia Reverse with some of the new support next year, and that is Musketeers for Neo Nectar. This one is also not organized just because I played it recently, but all the different support I've built this deck when it first came out. I believe it was the first or the third extra booster that we got for standard format, so kept it up to date. I know we're going to get way more Musketeers with the reverse support, so definitely can't wait to see if the reverse Cecilia works with the current Cecilia we have, or if it'll be a whole other card in itself and rechange how I play this deck altogether. Another one from the standard is Tsukuyomi. I was always a fan of Tsukuyomi. The Ride Chain from set 3 was one of the first decks I wanted to build from set 3. I didn't really pull enough of it. I had to end up trading for a good majority of the half moons and the full moons, but this deck I was able to pull the majority of the cards myself. I mixed it in with the Magus support, so I was happy with the reveal the top card of your deck setup that this card had, and I really loved the SVRs that you could pull from the set as well, the Secret Vanguard rares. Never got a full set of them, but still loved having the different options for this card, and the fact that it played into the original foiling of Tsukuyomi was definitely a, trip down memory lane there, and the fact that they made Crescent Moon a triple rare, which the original one was only a common, I believe, at the time also. If we get more support for this, I'm curious what they'll do with it, since we've had most of the cards for Tsukuyomi printed already. Another deck, I mixed around Shadow Paladins a lot. I had Phantom Blaster Dragon, but currently I have the latest from the clan selection, and that is Witches for Shadow Paladin. Mixed in with a good amount of the different support. There aren't too many Witches. You use mostly the support we got, so Fianna, and from Legion time, her mate, which is Witch of Reality Femme. The two work very, very well together, making it so Femme can be a Vanguard circle on the rear guard. A very interesting take on the playstyle, but there are still plenty of other Witches that I do run in the deck to make it feel like a full-fledged Witch deck, but still running Blaster Dark for a little more backup power, and one I still enjoy to play for all the different Shadow Paladin decks we've gotten. Every time there was a Shadow Paladin deck released, I didn't feel in love with the deck as much as I did when we finally got the Witches support. I just had the most fun playing this deck for its playstyle also. Real feel to the original Legion Witches, which I never got a chance to play because a bunch of my other friends wanted to build them first. All right, continuing with V Standard, I also have the Chronojet Dragon deck. Now, this one is also getting support in the clan selection, so this and Cecilia I'll definitely be excited for in the next couple weeks to build these decks. I believe we're getting Chronos Command Dragon. I might be mistaken there, but they are cards that work with the Chronojet Dragon card, so ones I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for since this deck was updated with the newest support we got from those sets. Also, I want to rebuild Lost Legend. That was the first Gear Chronicle deck we had from standard format, but I just got to get around to recollecting all those cards, including the interdimensional Mystery Dragon as well. We even have Chrono Dran as the starter. Never got the SP pack for this, but plenty of other cards, including Time Leaper Dragon, I believe was the newest one, and I was even able to get the SP from that set for this deck. All right, another one, and once again, another one that I was updating until the end, and that is Dimensional Robos. I always liked the Dimensional Robos from when they were first released in Blue Storm Armada, Great Dayusha. I actually didn't care for them as much when they were released because there weren't much support for them in Set 3. I believe Dayusha was the only one from Set 3. Then we got Enigma Storm support in Set 4, so we really didn't get many Dimensional Robos until Blue Storm Armada, but when they remade the Dimensional Robos as the main focus for Dimension Police in standard format, I definitely was excited just for that playstyle, and working with the force markers made it all the better. So you can hit for some pretty big numbers and have a lot of memorable units like Die Dragon, all the ones that you would combine into Dayusha, including the heals being remade into the same ones like Gore Rescue, and having a bunch of new ones made like Die Liner, and all the additional backup to just get this powerhouse out on the field for its true glory. I believe we're getting Die Kaiser. I'll see how I can mix around that card with this deck, or it may even just be its own deck in itself. If I have to put Great Dayusha on the sideline, it'll definitely be sad, but I'll have to wait and see. All right, before we get to Overdress, we do have a couple other V-Standard decks, one of them being another Kagero deck, and that is Dragonic Blade Master Suin. This one was one that I definitely had the most difficulty gathering up. The Wyvern Strike Dohas always were fluctuating in value, and I could just never seem to trade for them. But when this deck did get support, I was definitely impressed because it blew out of the water the original Dragonic Blade Master support. It was basically just a +5 critical retire kind of deck, but being able to mix it in with the Dauntless Drive Dragon, which is one of my favorite Kagero units aside from Dragonic Overlord, and its playstyle made me really, really like the standard format version of this deck, just for the multiple restands, the vision tokens you would gain for all of that setup. Really work together well with this deck, and one of the last few decks that I played recently from the standard format, just for its unique playstyle. The Vision token, especially on Rearguard Circle, made it all the more of a scary playstyle, but also well worth it. And let's see, I'm going to do a quick run through before I make sure this is the last of the V Standard. I believe it is, and that is Beast Deities. Now, this is the one deck that I actually didn't update. I ended up moving the Beast Deity Tigers from the clan selection that I picked up for Ethics Buster. That's it, Tiger. And I decided just to keep the original Beast Deity Azure Dragon build with a Luminal Dragon. I may get the Ethics Busters one day. I believe we are getting Ethics Buster Reverse in the Reverse pack, which I built that original deck when it came out, so that was my big reason for building Azure Dragon. I never actually built the original Azure Dragon when it came out in set 6, but I really do like the art style of Azure Dragon. It just gives a completely different feel to a lot of the different Nova Grappler units that we do run in this set, including Ashura Kaiser. The Azure Dragon lineup just feels completely different, and I can say the same about the Beast Deities in total for the deck. They just really don't play like many of the other decks we have currently for Cardfight Vanguard. And now that we're done with the V Standard decks, we'll now move on to the Overdress. Now we're going to move on first to the main deck that I play for the format, and that is Nirvana Overdress. Now, the funny thing about Nirvana is I actually picked up 2 of these decks. Now, I was able to get the one in a trade. The one on the left I built on my own. The other one, like I said, I got in a recent trade, traded some older cards for it. But I wanted to pick up 2 of the decks. You never know, you might have that one buddy who, wants to also build Overdress. So with both of the decks, I have the full lineup, including the Ride deck. The only difference being I have more of the high rarity cards in my Ride deck for the main one that I use for that playstyle. But like I said, I built them pretty much all similar to one another, and it's been one of my favorite decks to play in this format. It's a completely different playstyle. It doesn't really pertain to many other decks. I would say maybe Equip Gauge from Tachikaze's for standard format, but still, even then, it doesn't feel much like Equip Gauge. Overdress being its completely unique new thing for the deck, and I'm definitely going to like updating. I might not update both when set 3 comes out, but I'll definitely be excited to update the Nirvana deck I originally built for all the new support and all the new different Overdresses. And we're also going to be getting a brand new Nirvana unit in February, so when that comes out, we'll definitely want to be keeping this deck up to date for the max amount of play style and hopefully meta relevance, because Nirvana hasn't been too high in the meta currently, but still one of my favorite decks from Overdress to play. And then after I built Overdress, I also built Zorga. I wanted to go to a different nation for this playstyle, and all my friends were building Barrow Magnus. They were building Apex, Avion, I forgot its name, for Bastion, that's it, for a second there. But Zorga remained untouched, so I figured I really liked Masanori, from the anime. He was a very funny character, a very misleading character also, but his deck was definitely one that stood out. I saw some of the cards we're getting. I believe we're getting a retire order that basically takes away one of your opponent's units and then gives you one without having to use the cost for a counterblast like this version of it does. So if we just get more and more orders, I can definitely see this deck doing very well. It's risky, but I haven't really played much of Grand Blue in the past. This, I feel, definitely has a Grand Blue vibe with all of the drop zone plays you do more than anything, so I'm hoping I can at least master the deck a little more, because it does take a little bit of luck also having to make sure you don't mill anything, especially your over trigger, to the drop zone when using this deck. And I also, around the same time as Overdress and Zorga, built Eugene. Eugene is a deck I feel definitely needs more support to really stand out compared to some of the other decks currently. It's a retire deck, but it needs just consistency because you do invest a lot of your cards in it. But I wanted to build it because I am, the Dragon Empire player in our group. I didn't want to leave this deck out. If I was going to build Overdress, I was going to build every Dragon Empire deck that was available during Overdress or D-Standard format. So that includes Eugene. machine. I built it, and I prepare to remain loyal to it till the very end when we get all the support for it. And hopefully it still can remain a little bit relevant after we get all that support, being able to compete with all the original decks that came out with it. Because of all the decks, it feels like Eugene definitely would be one of the weaker tiers compared to cards like Magnolia, Zorga, you name it, all those different decks. We each had one that can at least try and keep up with the other decks in the format, but, you know, Eugene definitely needs a little more power, I would say. And one of the other ones from set 2, I did build both of the decks, including Dragonic Overlord and Phantom Blaster Dragon. Both of these are Keter Sanctuary and also Dragon Empire, but they also have the Shadow Paladin and Kagero symbols, so they can be used with their original clans as well. They both gave us a couple reprinted cards for both of these decks, so including the Ride line for Dragonic Overlord, using each of the rememberable cards that Kai ran in the original series. You can use some of the other Dragon Empire cards that we got, including Tetris Dad for the deck. I was just really happy. A lot of people weren't too happy about them remaking cards. They wanted to stick to the newer cards only for the D format, but I was happy to see at least Dragonic Overlord and Phantom Blaster Dragon. They're notable cards, and I guess they can be told as the legends from the past in this series of cards. So I built the deck. I liked it. I definitely do like Dragonic Overlord a little more than Phantom Blaster Dragon. Not to say that I don't like playing Phantom Blaster Dragon. I've always been a fan of the deck. I had Shadow Paladin for V Standard. I do want to one day rebuild an older version of Shadow Paladins as well. And with it, I guess the biggest thing with this deck is just the support needed. I don't know if we'll ever get any more support in upcoming sets, but even if we get some pretty good generic Keter Sanctuary support, I feel it could definitely help with how this deck was meant to be played, which is retiring your own rear guards to retire your opponent's rear guards and gain additional power onto the main unit of the deck, which is Phantom Blaster Dragon. We have a couple decks left before the video ends, and those being the Lyrical Monasterio decks that I built from the latest booster set, Lyrical Melody, and also the decks that I kept together. Some of the Lyrical Melody I either traded or borrowed from friends for the update, but I kept Vampires and Gemstones. So the first one, Vampires. This one I've had a lot of fun playing. It's an additional drive check play style. It plays unlike any of the other Lyrical Monasterio decks, which is a good majority of them. A lot of them focus on orders, some focus on big power units, and your Felty Rosa just focuses on the additional power it can give to those rear guards that it calls out onto the field. And that's something unique about the Lyrical Monasterios, and something that you don't really see much from even the decks that the Lyrical Monasterio was based off of, which are Bermuda Triangle. And lastly, the Prismagica or Gemstone deck uses orders in the form of Sapphire and Ruby to place into the Soul of Prismagica. I built this one just as an additional one that I wanted to see what I had the most of after opening up all my different boxes and sneak entries, and Prismagica was that deck. So I decided I had the SPs, I had all the other ones, and I might try to foil out a good number of the D format decks that I have. I know I have some commons still in some of the decks, but if I can get foil versions of them, I'll definitely look into it, because all the decks that I showed in the collection video today are all decks that I plan to hold on to, not ones that I tend to want to move anytime soon. That's why the Cardfight collection, I would say, has shrunk a bit since the last deck collection video, but they're all decks that I use, all decks that I like to keep as well, and ones that I'm happy about with the collection overall. And I hope you all enjoyed the video. Definitely was a long one, but a trip down memory lane for a good amount of the different decks. If you want to see a video, me doing the same for my future card buddy fight collection, definitely do let me down below. Also, let me know what decks you still have from all three of the formats. I'd love to hear in the comment section on that as well. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kiraqualia out.